When I was younger, I constantly carried around this yellow umbrella and a copy of Dorian Gray, which I have since lost. I did this not for any fear of inclement weather or a particular fondness for the works of Oscar Wilde. I toted them because I was convinced this was the route to finding the love of my life. I was gonna sit at a coffee shop with yellow umbrella on table, and a dashing young man was gonna walk up to me and ask me what I was reading. The fuel for this delusion was my love of the show How I Met Your Mother, where the love interest was represented by her yellow umbrella, and that this was the way that Summer met her husband in the movie 500 Days of Summer.
I was sitting in a deli and reading Dorian Gray, and a guy comes up to me and asks me about it, and now he's my husband.
This story makes me sound slightly out of touch with reality, but I'm not unique. The truth is, there are countless others like me taking cues from movies on how to live their romantic lives. Maybe they're not as literal as me, but about 90% of young people have admitted to turning to movies for information on love, according to a 1996 study from Santa Clara University. With that in mind, there's one movie people commonly cite as their guiding star of romance. And that is When Harry Met Sally, a film about two people who hate each other, but after they both get out of serious relationships, become friends and eventually fall in love. Since its release in 1989, several people have coined it as the father of modern-day rom-coms, with its unique, conversational, conflictless format and extremely quotable lines.
I'll have what she's having.
Because of how raw and real the film is, many people have admitted to using it as a roadmap for life. There is no shortage of BuzzFeed articles praising it, and statements like this littered around the internet.
When Harry Met Sally has served as an example I could keep in my pocket of what love should feel like, an endless, unspooling conversation with a partner who, like a counterweight, provides equilibrium.
But while some may see it as a masterclass in romantic education, I disagree. I think the film is a self-aggrandizing fluff piece that is actually detrimental in the romantic ideals that it projects. So a while back, my friends at the YouTube channel Cult Popture invited me to take part in the Director Project, where once a month a group of video essayists come together to analyze the works of one director. And this month was Nora Ephron. So even though she only wrote When Harry Met Sally while Rob Reiner directed it, I figured it was as good a time as any to explain why I'm not a social pariah for finding fault in a movie that everybody else seems to think is perfect. Side note, I'm not saying When Harry Met Sally is a bad movie. I'm just stating why I'm not really a fan of it and why I don't think it should be a guide for love. But before we dive into why I think worship of the film is so unhealthy, we first need to keep talking about why people worship the film in the first place. And it seems like there are two main reasons for that. The first reason is what I'm gonna group together as the dialogue and characters. And the second reason is how realistically and organically Harry and Sally's friendship and relationship forms. So let's break down those two ideas, starting with the dialogue and character clump. Every single article and comment I read complimenting the film usually mentioned the dialogue in terms of writing and the story structure. Notably that the film doesn't have much of a plot. The movie mostly hinges on two people connecting and building character through conversations while life happens around them. The obstacles are all internal, unlike a lot of other pieces in the rom-com genre, where external obstacles like infidelity or blood feuds keep lovers apart. Through the dialogue-driven plot, audiences have grown a passionate bond with the characters of Harry and Sally. They see them as two flawed yet charming figures. Sally, an overreactive and particular woman, and Harry, a neurotic and death-obsessed man. Through this duo, many claim that Ephron exposes the secret inner workings of the female and male minds when it comes to love and relationships. According to the film, men take a long time to mourn loss, will sleep with almost anything, and see intimacy almost exclusively as a way to scratch some emotional or physical itch. Women, on the other hand, are apparently highly practical when it comes to selecting partners, sexually repressed, and longing for commitment and intimacy. Also, they fake orgasms.
Yes!
This representation of the quote-unquote truth between men and women is actually one of the selling points of the film, according to Ephron and Reiner.
You basically interviewed Andy and me to get stories and
yes,
things.
It was a horrifying experience.
Just to hear about our dating lives and what we had gone through.
What you had put other persons of
Through.
another sex through,
Yeah.
yes.
But that's what I think made the movies work so well, because you being horrified or whatever by, oh my God, this is what these guys do, and then you adding the elements of what, oh my God, this is what women do or what women think about. That's what I think made the movie work so well.
I think so, too.
because
The next thing people took from the film is how realistically it showcases the development of friendship and love. They say what makes Harry and Sally's dynamic so realistic is that they weren't head over heels for each other when they first met. It took circumstance and time to bring them together. And even then, they were their only barriers to love, which can be relatable. On paper, it's beautiful. An archive of different perspectives on intimacy and how friendship can be the strongest foundation for a relationship. But in practice, is When Harry Met Sally really as perfect as everyone says it is? First, let's deal with that dialogue character group. I preface this by saying that I don't reject the premise of a movie driven almost exclusively by interesting conversations. Some of my favorite scenes and movies in general are just interesting conversations about feelings, truths, and dissecting the world. However, in Harry Met Sally, if you look past the quippiness into the actual content, they start to break down. Both these people aren't lovably flawed or relatable. Sally is unreasonably controlling and uptight to the point where she only sees what she wants to and everyone must reach her high standards. And Harry is considerably worse as a chauvinist who hides behind a mask of seemingly deep existential thought and self-pity. The only reason they're the only thing getting in the way of them being together is because they're both so emotionally stunted that they can't look past their own nose. They're more concerned about what they want in the moment while everyone else's needs takes a backseat. I mean, the back seat is nice in terms of where we are right now because, like, you get to hang out with all those cool little Pokemon dudes. But in the real life, the backseat is not so great. Take, for example, that fake orgasm scene that everyone apparently finds hysterical. I found it less comical and more horribly uncomfortable imagining what it must have been like for the other people in the restaurant trying to enjoy their lunch. It was the act of someone so profoundly self-centered and unconcerned. Editing Ari here. I'm talking over this because I don't want to have her screaming, but the guy behind her is not having any of it. There's not even a little amusement in this man's face. And I think that's honestly the most appropriate response to somebody doing this in public. Anyway, end of thought. Like, I don't care if you're Meg Ryan or Chris Evans as Captain America or just any other variation of Chris Evans.
That is America's ass.
No one needs to see you doing that. By the way, can someone please explain to me why everyone thought this scene was so funny? Is it because Meg Ryan's a stunted actress who looks like she's in a community theater version of porn? Because I don't get it. Anyway, I argue that through this broken and self-centered lens is how the film depicts the gender differences it's so proud of showcasing. I understand that men and women tend to have different perspectives because of biology, life experience, socioeconomic factors. There's just a lot of things that go into this. But at the core, we're all just people looking to be accepted. This universal need for companionship is sort of shown at the end when Harry confesses his love to Sally, but for the rest of the movie, they tend to stick to outdated and false stereotypes.
Oh, I've been looking for a red suede pump.
Men are emotionally unavailable, egotistical beings with a compulsion to weasel their way out of uncomfortable conversations and no control over their emotions.
This stupid wagon wheel Roy Rogers garage sale coffee table.
I thought you liked it.
I was being nice!
Whereas women are emotionally guarded control freaks who often think they can change a man and require constant validation.
The point is, he's never gonna leave her.
So what else is new? You've known this for 2 years.
You're right. You're right. I know you're right.
Side note for clarity's sake, I'm getting some of that description about women from Carrie Fisher's character, but I still think it's valid because the side characters also add thematic texture to the film. All this feeds into our breakdown of the second reason people tend to like this film: the realistic development of Harry and Sally's relationship. To counter this assertion, we must go back to the idea that both characters are selfish. There was no point in this film where I was excited for these two to get together, because despite the awkward glances and compliments they throw at each other every so often,
You look really good in skirts.
they have no romantic chemistry. Through their conversations, I think you can see that they actually don't love each other as friends or otherwise. They were judgmental, overly defensive, and quick to justify their skewed perspectives while simultaneously shutting down the other person's worldview. They often recount shallow stories of past relationships and weakly reasoned perspectives on sex and the initial stages of dating.
Go back to her place, you have sex, and the minute you're finished, you know what goes through your mind? How long do I have to lie here and hold her before I can get up and go home? Is 30 seconds enough?
That's what you're thinking? Is that true?
Sure. All men think that.
Which are generally not topics that help to foster mature relationships. In discussion about writing the film, Efron and Reiner pride themselves on...
People often ask me, well, there's these two people that they're professional people, they're living in New York, they're single people, they both have their own apartments in their lives, and yet the whole movie they're talking about relationships. Knowing single people, don't they ever talk about their careers and about work? And the answer I always give to them is, yeah, they talked about work all the time. I just didn't run the camera during that period.
Yes.
I only run the camera when they were talking about
But I remember talking to you about that, and you said, I don't care about that.
Yeah.
And it was actually a great relief to me.
No, because it was about just the two people. It wasn't about what they do for a living.
But I don't think that was the best course of action, or at least not in the way they went about it. I'm okay with Harry and Sally chatting for an hour and a half about relationships, but you need to give me something more than Sally discussing the dreams that she has where a faceless man rips off her clothes.
Then what happens?
That's it.
That's it?
Like, how did ending a long-term relationship affect how she sees entering a new one? Is she afraid of getting too close to someone for fear that it'll end in heartbreak despite it all looking so beautiful at the beginning? Build a bridge between them. Don't just glue some popsicle sticks together and call it a day. If Efron and Reiner weren't going to make them develop their relationships by talking about relationships in any substantial way, then for the love of God, give me more. Anything to make these shells feel like people. Insights into what they value, their insecurities, who they are, and why they're like that. Sure, Harry reads the last page of every book he starts, but why? Instead of having him state that after spitting grape seeds at a closed window, wouldn't it add more texture to explain where that quirk started? For example, now this might not be the best example, but it's an example. What if Harry told a story about how his father always wanted to see him finish law school, but died before he could? From that, Harry developed this terror of not having control over his life. So he compensated for that by reading the last page of every book he started to give him the illusion of mastery over his own destiny. I don't know about you, but to me, that's a lot more interesting than a throwaway anecdote that only serves to make Harry seem more pretentious.
That, my friend, is a dark side.
Okay, so now that we got that rant covered, let me backtrack a little to explain a rather big claim that I made where I don't think Harry and Sally really loved each other. Some of you might be thinking, they seemed like they cared about each other, they spent time together, and were supportive. Isn't that love? To tackle that question, we must first define what love is. But to do that, I need to find the meaning of love.
Hey! What's love?
Alright, that was useless. I guess I'll have to read and look inward or whatever. Ugh. To explain my thought process, I need to differentiate between love and being in love, or romantic love. Because by separating the friend and romantic aspects of their relationship, I think Efron forces us to consider the difference between the terms. For me, the statement that best sums up that distinction is, I love my family, but I'm not in love with my family. According to The Art of Love by Erich Fromm,
the active character of love becomes evident in the fact that it always implies certain basic elements common to all forms of love. These are care, responsibility, respect, and knowledge.
To describe each of these, care is the active concern for the life and the growth of that which we love. Responsibility is the act of responding to the needs expressed or unexpressed of another human. Respect is the concern that the other person should grow and unfold as he is. And knowledge is a want and pursuit of knowing someone as they are. All of these seamlessly result in actions fundamental to any good relationship, including open communication and putting other people's needs above your own. I think what separates base love from romantic love, besides hormones, is a feeling that who the other person is at their core complements you and builds you up to the point that you're willing to commit yourself to them for the foreseeable future. Essentially, you need them because you love them. Disclaimer, I'm aware that the definition of love is subjective.
It's very complex.
But since this is my video, we're going to go with my perspective on it. Disclaimer over. With these definitions, let's revisit Harry and Sally. Instead of exploring who each of them was or what they valued in terms of long-term partners and in life, they seemed more interested talking about themselves and their pseudo-intellectual and emotional ideas. It didn't feel like they loved each other, but rather they were friends that gave each other the space to unapologetically love themselves. Additionally, in moments where they did show signs of romantic feelings, it felt less like an expression of love and more like they were being possessive. Either being taken aback that the other person was seeing someone else, confused the other person wasn't jealous that they were seeing someone else.
Oh, I think it's great that you have a date.
You do?
Or them actively trash-talking the other person's partner because they had a crush and needed to make themselves feel better by diminishing someone else.
Does Julian seem a little stuffy to you?
Emily's a little young for Harry, don't you think?
This all leads up to the final moments of the film when Harry makes his speech about
When you realize you want to spend the rest of your life with somebody, you want the rest of your life to start as soon as possible.
iconic. But when he says that, what is he referring to? What does he love about her that makes him want to commit himself to her?
I love that you get cold when it's 71 degrees out. I love that it takes you an hour and a half to order a sandwich. I love that you get a little crinkle above your nose when you're looking at me like I'm nuts. I love that after I spend a day with you, I can still smell your perfume on my clothes. And I love that you are the last person I want to talk to before I go to sleep at night.
Each one of those are superficial observations that have nothing to do with who she is or their dynamic. If he really loves her because she has wrinkles and gets cold easily, maybe he should try his luck at a nursing home. I hear a lot of people there fit that description. Who needs 1980s Meg Ryan when you have Kat, the sassy World War II field nurse? This speech follows a huge falling out, which I think is the most idiotic example of how this relationship is just two people patting themselves on the back as opposed to love. Right after Harry and Sally sleep together, Harry gets all distant and cold. They both tell each other after that the sex was a mistake. They get into a fight over the apparent awkwardness and stop talking to each other. If this was love in any capacity, Harry would have never gone silent after sex, and they would have never brushed away what it meant to them. Real love is being able and wanting to communicate and work through issues. Both of them stayed in their own heads and refused to know, care, respond, and respect each other. Instead, they put their own pride front and center until one of them decided to break the silence. And based on the previous definition, I wouldn't call that love.
You just can't show up here, tell me you love me, and expect that to make everything all right. It doesn't work this way.
For all those reasons, I don't think When Harry Met Sally is a valid blueprint for relationships. When people hold it in high esteem, I don't think it's because it reflects the reality of dating, but rather it fills a desire, which any good movie should do. As described by Bill Nichols in his book Engaging Cinema,
desire is a longing for something absent or unavailable. Language, including film, is one way to express our desire. Desire lives through images, which give us a mental picture of the things that we want to obtain. Images offer us the power to regain and celebrate, to possess and extol what we might not otherwise possess.
I think this is almost entirely what the romantic comedy genre is based on. They stretch and distort love for the sake of entertainment and to fill audiences' desires that one day they too will find someone to make them feel not as alone in this world, while also giving them the opportunity to live out romantic fantasies. In terms of When Harry Met Sally, everyone's had a crush on a friend at some point or another. Through accessible yet majorly flawed characters, the film lets you play out this idea of, what if you and that person got together, and love is just under your nose? However, reality almost never lives up to what happens in movies. Even Nora Ephron admits that When Harry Met Sally is pure fiction.
The first draft, they
yeah.
did not get together.
Right.
And that to me has always seemed like, forgive me, the true ending.
Commercially, you had to, kind of had to do that, but it didn't feel right. You know what I mean? It didn't feel right.
For the story, it doesn't really feel right. I know that there are people, because I meet them all the time, and then I also have way more people who come up to me and say, oh, I'm in this Harry-Sally thing, blah, 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 and I say, don't let the movie fool you. Those people really don't get together in real life. Well, if two people meet each other and they don't do it, it's because something's missing.
Yeah, sure.
And it's hard to make up for that.
Yeah.
But now the real question here is, what's wrong with people thinking that When Harry Met Sally is realistic? Why do I care if people are using an irrelevant movie from the 1980s as their guide for happy partnership? Well, I think it's important to discuss because believing the film is an immaculate representation of reality might actually be a harmful mindset to bring into real relationships. Standing in the rain to profess your feelings to someone might be cute on screen, but in real life you just end up wet and alone.
I was waiting outside in the rain for you. What on earth would make you think I would like that? Movies?
My proof of this isn't just my own attempts to win love through rain gear and lying about books that I've read. I've got science on my side.
Yes, science!
Or rather, social science, which is really the most anybody could ever ask for in a video with this specific topic. One of the main theories on how media can influence audience worldview is called cultivation theory. Cultivation theory suggests that you subconsciously start accepting beliefs and repeated themes you're exposed to by consuming substantial amounts of media within a certain genre. This theory makes even more sense when you consider some of the harmful viewpoints perpetuated about love throughout society. Many of these views can be traced back to or repeatedly seen within popular movies and TV shows. For example, people who watch a lot of rom-coms are more likely to believe in the idea of a soulmate or the one.
The boy, Tom Hanson of Margate, New Jersey, grew up believing that he'd never truly be happy until the day he met the one.
The consequence being people who do believe in the one tend not to work on their relationships as much because they think, well, if there's an issue, it must be because me and my partner aren't soulmates. There's nothing I can do about it. To me, an adequate sum up of harmful rom-com conventions that have seeped into real life through possible cultivation theory is the Relationship Beliefs Inventory, a scale that assesses 5 typical dysfunctional beliefs about relationships. These 5 dysfunctional beliefs are: disagreement is destructive. Any argument will lead to a breakup. Mind reading is expected. Partners should instinctively know what the other person is thinking or feeling without communicating. Partners cannot change. No one can improve or change themselves or their relationships. Sexual perfectionism, the belief that compatible couples need to be perfectly matched sexually right off the bat. And 5, sexes are different. Every sex fundamentally acts and wants different things, falling in line with societal stereotypes. While this scale was originally made to examine the correlation between holding these beliefs and how well couples would do in couple therapy, they do appear in line with conventions promoted by rom-coms.
You know what sucks? Realizing that everything you believe in is complete and utter bullshit sucks.
And if we look back at When Harry Met Sally, we can see the film hits almost every single one of these points.
You know, I hate that kind of remark. It sounds like a compliment, but really it's an insult.
Disagreement is destructive. After Harry and Sally sleep together, the first time they talk in weeks, they blow up about the situation and Sally decides to cut ties with Harry. Mind reading is expected. Again, after they sleep together, they lie about what the night meant to them and went back to their lives. But then weeks later, Sally gets irritated with Harry because of how he acted after sex, without telling him it bothered her at the time. Sexual perfectionism. Through the movie, sex and what constitutes good sex is the main topic of conversation, with the film going as far as having Sally defend that she's had it.
Yes, I have.
No, you haven't.
It just so happens that I have had plenty of good sex.
Also, Sally fakes her orgasm to make Harry feel insecure that the girls he's been with may not have had quote-unquote fun with him, mainly framing sex as an act that happens as opposed to something meaningful. Sexes are different. That's one of the selling points of the movie. It's why people say they like it. And while I can't think of an example from the movie that promotes partners can't change, they compensate for it by pushing the idea of the one, and if 2 people are really meant for each other, love will find a way. They do this with interstitials of old couples telling the stories of how they got together, with Harry and Sally's being added to the collection of couch people at the end of the film. They knew each other all their lives, and despite initially hating each other, their love blossomed. Another side note, during this segment, they seemed super unhappy. It kind of felt like they were already bored with each other even though they just got married, but that's neither here nor there.
Editing Ari again, I think I realized why they seem so unhappy. It's because they have no emotion in their face compared to any of the other people who went before them. Also, Sally has her arms crossed the whole time, which is not a welcoming gesture. Another side thought, in their interstitial, they go way too in-depth into superficial things like their wedding and specifically their wedding cake. I feel that them talking a little bit about how they felt after they said I love you to each other would be more interesting than them discussing the fact that they had a coconut cake with chocolate on the side, but maybe that's just me.
Going back, despite some people thinking that the film is harmless fun or a suitable depiction of reality, It's not. It's just another rom-com with some above-average dialogue plagued with the same unrealistic conventions as almost every other film in the genre. A formula not for a healthy relationship, but one wrought with dashed expectations, aggression, and hopelessness. Relationships are hard. They all require mutual respect, understanding, and empathy, but at the same time, each one is different. So while it might be easy to refer to movies for life advice, that's not what they're there for. As much fun as it was to play pretend in coffee shops, the umbrella and book never worked. Just because When Harry Met Sally scratches a niche romantic itch in the back of your head doesn't make it the authority on healthy partnerships. Because while Harry and Sally may have met, I don't think they ever fell in love. And those are my controversial thoughts on a popular romantic comedy. Again, I made this movie to contribute to the Director Project. If you want to watch more video essays dissecting other Nora Ephron films like Sleepless in Seattle or You've Got Mail or other ones, I'll leave the link to the playlist in the description. Also, if you have something to say about a Nora Ephron film, you can make a video essay about it and tweet it to @cultpopsure and they'll add it to the playlist. At this point, I'd like to thank my patrons, Matt David, Patrick, Jessica Lee, Eric Brown. Thank you guys and everyone else who contributes for your support. I really appreciate it. If you also want to support my channel, you can like this video, subscribe, and or donate to my Patreon. The link is in the description below. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.